Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. I am delighted to have my friend Brian today talking about his books. His book recommendations have been, it's the most structured and most thoughtful, thoughtfully structured book recommendations I've seen. So I've talked to him many times about it. So I'm delighted to have, to talk to him. I talk to him quite a bit, try to talk to him once a week about various things that we are working on. So it's delightful. So you guys get to listen in on what we're talking about. So Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, you can.
Wonderful. And thanks for, calling in all the way from Australia. Just appreciate that. So tell me about your book recommendations. So what is the range of your reading? How did you choose the books? Why did you structure it that way? Please.
Sure. So I grouped my book recommendations into several topic categories. The reason I did this is that after browsing a lot of different book lists on the internet, I noticed that they weren't really structured so that someone looking at the list would know what they would get from a book. So it's usually maybe a list of 100 books with maybe a brief description of each one. But without the structure, it's very confusing for someone looking at a list to learn from it. So what I thought was that it would be more helpful for someone looking at the list if I could group them into categories. So say someone is interested in learning about psychology, they could look at the list, all the books in the psychology list. And then I went another step further because I thought even within a category, if you just have a list of books, it's unclear to the reader which ones are good to read, which ones they should start with, because when you're learning a new topic, or even when you're brushing up on an old topic, what you really want to do is to read and learn things that are appropriate to your knowledge level. Mm-hmm. If you start with a book that's too difficult, you won't get anything from it. If you start with a book that's too easy, then you already know it. So this logically means that there should be a rough sort of structure for each topic, going from the basic foundational books up to more advanced books. And so with that in mind, I thought that the best way to structure them would be a linear series of ascending difficulty books. And so that's how I structured the book recommendation list.
And what about all the headings? How did you decide what to cover? It's quite a range of books. So how did you choose the headings, not the categories?
Right. So there are different, a lot of different headings, and most of them are things that I am personally interested in. So this is a subset of all the things that I'm interested in that I think would be, one would be the most useful for, in general, for other readers to learn about. And secondly, things that I think would be also interesting to other people. So some of my other interests, which would be boring and not as useful, I've left off the list. So the ones that remain are the ones that are both interesting and useful. And I could go through each of them and why I think it's interesting.
Absolutely. You mean just the categories, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's go through the categories.
Sure. Okay, so the first one is power. And power is really useful in our world. It has a bad reputation in some quarters because it's seen as being maybe too overly focused on or being selfish. But I think that power can be used for both good or bad, and it's mainly a way of making yourself more effective. So that's definitely a very important topic. The next one is wisdom. So after we have the power to arrange things to our liking, we should choose things that are good for us and good for the world. And so that would be the point of the wisdom sequence, is finding out what we want and whether what we want is good. And if it's not good, then how we should change to want something that's better for everyone. So that's the second topic heading. The third one is the optimal person, which is when everyone has flaws, this is unavoidable. So these books tell us what are common flaws that are easily fixable. And so that would be a very quick and easy way of increasing our effectiveness and just improving ourselves overall.
Thank you.
That's the
Next one
third
is,
topic.
yeah, next one is brain rewiring.
Brain rewiring. So this is a more complicated topic, which has greater risk and greater reward. It's about how to change our entire mindset, our preferences, our thoughts, or our habits and ideas. So
Wonderful. So this is the one that we are going to focus on
sure,
next.
yeah.
So we can go to the next topic, next category.
Sure. And then the next one is human ethology. So this is just a name for a very broad range of topics that talk about how we as humans think and behave, and how that interacts with other people. So since we live in a world with many other people, and the being a good person and an effective person depends on interacting with other people effectively, this tells us more about how to do that.
Excellent.
And then the next one is life satisfaction, which is pretty self-explanatory, I think. If we're happy, then we'll be, I think that's a good terminal goal, but it also makes us do other things better. And then China is something I'm interested in personally. I debated whether to include it on this list or not, but I think it's becoming quite relevant to all of us. So I included that as well. And then lastly is business and investing, which is my former job. So that could be helpful to people as well. So I included that.
Okay.
Oh, right. Okay. The last one is primitives, which is basically interesting building blocks that I think are generally useful as a foundation, especially if we want to be more creative, because with more foundational building blocks, we'll be able to create more connections and create more creative insights. So I guess that's the topics I chose and why I chose them.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks. So what we're going to do is that we're going to talk about one sequence, because I want to talk to you about how is it a sequence and how it works. And then I have a couple other books that I want to focus on. And then I invite the participants to ask about any questions. So we'll be going through these two things, and then we'll open it up to questions at that point. All right.
Great. Okay.
So let's talk about brain rewiring. So tell me about this section, and why is it that left brain, right stuff is the starting point of this sequence?
Sure. Okay, so this sequence is about changing ourselves in a more radical way than we generally do. So what this means is that
let me make one comment, Brian. I mean, one of the things that has always impressed me about you is that you are very conscientious about changing things. At the same time, you're very realistic about what you can change and what you can't change. Also, you're extremely aware of the costs involved in changing. So it's all about kind of, you have this kind of optimizing approach to change. I mean, this is kind of contrasted with, on one hand, saying, hey, I can be anything I want to be, and just put in a lot of energy, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. So that's one kind of approach. Or other kind of approach, say, okay, I am just what I am and I can't do anything about it. So you are kind of very thoughtful about what change and the cost of change. So that's what I've found unique about kind of your approach to change. But please go on.
Thank you. So you're right. I think every change has a cost, and especially business and management books seem to present change as free, but as you say, it's not. So when we change, we should always be aware of the opportunity cost and what else we're giving up. And that's why I think a lot of general change recommendations only recommend very small changes. That's for the safety of the user. If you make larger changes, the risk is correspondingly higher. And especially if you do it the wrong way, the cost can be much higher than the benefit. And so that's why I think these books are structured so that the safest ones are first. And then after you read and understand them, it makes this next one safer to use and also more useful. So that's the theory behind why I arranged them in this way.
So shall we go? I want to go one by one and now
Sure.
talk about each of the books and see what each of the book does. So the first one is Left Brain, Right Stuff.
Left Brain, Right Stuff. So this is the easiest one. It's a business and management book. It's a small volume, pretty easy to read in 2 or 3 days. The main theme of the book is that generally all top performers switch between two modes of action and thinking. So one of the earliest examples in the book is golfers. When top golfers play, they switch between two modes. One is when they're analyzing the shot. So maybe they're at the starting tee and they're planning out how they want to play this next course so that they use the minimum amount of strokes. So taking into account weather factors and the relative positioning of people and all that. So using this more rational and analytical approach, they think of what the next shot will be. And that's the first part. Once they've done that, they immediately switch into a non-rational mode, a mode where they are extremely overconfident and they believe that they are certain to make the shot exactly as they want it. And so in this mode, that's how they actually do the physical motion of taking the shot. They believe that they can do anything. They believe that they're the best player, they are invincible, and that they will definitely put the shot right where they want it. So that's how they think, and then that's how they do the shot. And then immediately after they do the shot, they switch back to the analytical mode as well, which and they do this dozens of times or hundreds of times in an entire golf game. So this is not a natural way of behaving. Usually people prefer to stay in one of these two modes. And so what this book is saying is that, no, if you want to be a great performer in the narrow fields of sports and business and management, then this is what you have to do. So like a manager would have to be very analytical when planning the business, but when he's talking to his employees and colleagues, he has to be very enthusiastic. He has to totally believe that the company will succeed and so on. So that's what this book is teaching us. It's saying first that there's a necessity for this type of thinking, and secondly, how we can go about doing this type of thinking. So
why did you put it in the beginning of the sequence?
This is the beginning book because it introduces a concept which is very important for the future books, and it's pretty safe. If you mess this up, the worst that happens is that you become one of these two. But everyone is already generally one of these two. So it's a useful technique, and it prepares the groundwork for the later books.
Excellent.
So I would recommend this book to everyone. I think it's a great book, even as a general reading topic, but especially for if we want to change our future thought processes.
Excellent. So the next one is the Charisma Myth.
Yes. The Charisma Myth is a book that teaches us how to be charismatic. So the difference, the general feeling of people is that there are some very rare people who are naturally charismatic. They have an aura around them that attracts people, and they are very persuasive. This book teaches us that this is not the case, that it's a learned skill. There are 4 different approaches to charisma, and that you can choose one which is most effective for you, and that's enough. So So this is not only this is really useful because being more persuasive generally lets us help us achieve our goals, but it also reveals to us how much of the brain and of other people's brains is malleable, and how much everything just depends on your own mindset. One of the insights in the book is that if you believe you're charismatic and you practice it, then you will become charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
And
I can't wait. What are the four ways of being charismatic?
That's a great question. I only remember well, one of them, which is the one I'm the best at, is called focus charisma.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you're charismatic because you're focusing intently on someone, because you're paying them total attention. You're making them feel like they are the center of the universe. So that's the one which is I find that a lot of introverts are generally good at. And then there are three others, which I do not remember at the moment because those are not the ones I use. But one of them is basically energy. If you have a very high energy level, you can inspire other people. The other another one is a vision. I forget the exact name. If you have a very compelling vision that you totally believe in, other people will naturally believe in your vision as well. And then the last one I forgot because it's the opposite to my. It's a diamond. That's the one that's opposite my style.
Nice.
So there are four styles. Generally, most people will be good at 1 to 3 of them. It's very rare for people to be good at all four because 2 of them are opposed to each other. And then the book teaches us practice skills for increasing our charisma. And the theory behind why we can increase our charisma. And so this is, I chose this book next because of several reasons. One is that it's incredibly useful, as I said before. Second is that it exposes how we work. Third is that it provides a system for increasing our charisma. So it shows that this skill can be learnable and that there's a systematic way to learn it. And so this book is also very safe. We can, I think being more charismatic is better for everyone and for the world overall. So this is why it's the next book on the list.
Excellent. Next one up is Impro.
Impro is a pretty popular book in some quarters. It's a book about how improvisation works. It's a narrow topic, improvisation, especially theater improvisation. That's when you have people on a stage and they act out a play without knowing what they're going to do beforehand. But for our purposes here, the most important insight from Impro is that improvisation depends on being in sync with your collaborators. And this is not just true in the theater, but it's also true in general life with our friends at work and so on. Once we're in sync with other people, we can exchange a lot of information non-verbally. And so this helps us be more effective. And it also teaches us how we can exchange more information non-verbally. So this opens us up to the possibility that there's a lot of information that we can use, which is subconscious. A lot of the stuff that we do, he talks about on the theater stage, a lot of the stuff that we do is subconscious. We react to what other people are doing without thinking about it. And we understand what other people want to do. We understand their intentions without having to think about it. And so this is really important because this is a skill that we can apply to others, but later on, it's a skill that we can apply to ourselves. It's if we want to really rewire our brain, we don't do it intentionally, as in deliberately. We don't do it deliberately saying, oh, now I will change my brain this way. What we do is we subconsciously understand our brain and how it works. and then we give it gentle suggestions. And Impro is all about this. So this is the next book because I want readers to understand how we actually go about changing things. And so,
Excellent.
Impro, it's also fun. So even if we don't get anything from it, we can learn a new fun skill.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'm a big fan of improv because it just
Yes, yeah,
it's a lot of fun and very challenging and very enjoyable.
Yes.
So next one up, I'm really intrigued by is instant self-hypnosis. What is that?
Okay, so instant self-hypnosis is it's a very popular book about the hypnotherapy. So hypnotherapy, okay, so the previous 3 books are totally safe. Hypnotherapy is can be very slightly risky for some people, a minority of people, although I think it's still pretty safe. So what hypnosis and hypnotherapy and self-hypnosis is about is that you want to enter, it's all about teaching you to enter a trance state. So the Impro book talks about trance as well in one of the chapters, which is why it follows on the Impro. Trance is a very powerful state where you as a person have access to lower levels of your brain function. So what this means is that you can use it to directly change lower level habits. It's sort of like accessing a computer at a low level command system.
Mm-hmm.
So as an example, if you have bad habits like smoking or biting your nails, hypnotherapy is a scientifically proven method with loads of research backup saying that you can use it to effectively change your habits. So if you visit a licensed hypnotherapist, they'll find a way to make you enter trance mode, and then they will suggest that you don't want to smoke or you don't want to bite your nails. And so with a few applications of this therapy, you can actually change it. And this is one of the most effective ways of changing your habits. There are other books out there talking about ways of changing your habits and having a more effective lifestyle. But for me, I think this is one of the most complete ways of changing your habits. And so why this instant self-hypnosis book is that this book is written in a very light way. It's sort of like a used car salesman's type of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, oh, you can totally do this. It's so amazing. I had one client who came in, and after one session, everything was fine. And so I think some people, especially people who tend to be more rational, will have a slight resistance to this style of presentation because it pattern matches to things that are maybe too gimmicky or marketing. But the science in the book is solid, and it's the best book for explaining hypnosis that I could find. So if you, I guess you have to just deal with the tone of the book because the insights are very useful.
Wonderful. Next one, the last two are, the first one is Eriksonian Approaches.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about this. I'm not familiar.
Okay, so this Eriksonian Approaches, this book is relatively difficult to find, but it talks about the Erikson approach to hypnosis. This is the instant self-hypnosis book is sort of a manual for hypnosis, but it doesn't go into very much detail. It gives you a taster of what you can do. So this book, if you've read the previous book and you think, okay, I do want to try this. I do want to try and reshape how my brain works. This is the most detailed book about how to do that. So it has a lot of techniques focus, but there was a therapist called Erikson who came up with this an approach to induce trance state in clients. Because the hypnosis is two parts. One is inducing trance state, and second is the suggestion. The suggestion part is pretty easy to figure out. Even the instant self-hypnosis books teaches you how. But entering trance state reliably is difficult, and it's different for every person. And so what this book is, it's a huge compilation of many, many different approaches that he's tried that induces trance state in people. So you can try one. If it doesn't work, try the next one. There are hundreds of them. So eventually you find one that can reliably enter trance state. And some of them are pretty fun and interesting to do as well. Most of them focus on confusing you enough so that your brain tires of making sense of things, and it sort of surrenders. And so then it gives up trying to make sense of things, and then you can access the brain itself. And so it can be risky because these techniques can confuse you. So you have to have the discipline to only use them as you should be using them.
Now, last book seems very different from the rest.
Yes, this is a book about one particular school of Buddhism, which is focused on instant enlightenment, which is different from other schools of Buddhism, which focus on many years of practice. And so reading this book is not dangerous, but it's difficult to understand because this particular school of Buddhism is very difficult to understand as well. The reason I included it here is that the concept itself helps us with brain rewiring. It's explanation that it's possible to instantly change your beliefs and your mindset. And that's the conviction that we need in order to successfully implement the approaches in the previous books. And so if you go through all of these books, I think each one builds on the one before, and in other words, each book will be more helpful if you've read the ones before them.
Okay, let's see. We are about at the halfway mark. So let me ask you just one question, and then I will open it up to everybody so that they can start asking questions. So folks, if you have questions, you can go ahead and type in exclamation mark, or you can type in the question, whatever you prefer, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. All right, so let me tell you about our group. You know, everybody here is deeply interested in kind of psychology and philosophy. They're also they have kind of science bent in the sense that they are trying to think about these things, trying to evaluate which ones make sense or not make sense. And they're all focused, or we are all focused on improving our lives. So it's not kind of just passive study of these things, but it's all about improving our lives. So that's that describes most of us here. So if you had to pick one or two books to recommend to us from this entire list of 50 books, what would you recommend?
Good question. Give me a few seconds to think of the best.
You can ask me questions if you want, or you can answer the question at another time. Go ahead.
In general, how long have has everyone spent thinking about this?
Typically, I would say most of the people who come here have been doing that large part of their lives, like 20 years, 30 years, something like that. So they've been doing that. And what we do is that we actively talk about these subjects. So they come here so we can share what we have learned, what all of us have learned together.
In that sense, I would recommend, instant self-hypnosis.
Okay.
Maybe quickly read the books before that and then go to instant self-hypnosis.
No, I'm not restricting just to this particular sequence, but of all the books that you have in the book recommendations, is that the one that you would pick?
Yes, the reason is that if you've been thinking about these things for a long time, you probably have a good idea of what you want, and you probably have a good idea of what sort of self-improvement that you're comfortable with. And if you've been doing it for a reasonably long amount of time, you've probably figured out that in general, when you try to improve yourself, 9 things out of 10 don't work. And then the last thing is very effective.
Yeah.
And I think this instant self-hypnosis will be one of the ones that maybe for half of the people will be extremely effective. For the other half, it probably will be not effective because of large differences in how people can easily enter trance state. But I think overall, I think this is the highest expected value recommendation.
Excellent. So then let me follow up with one more question. This may be a difficult question. What's your favorite book in all of this?
My favorite book?
Yeah.
Probably either Cows, Pigs, Wars, and Witches, or the 2 books by Fukuyama.
Okay.
I'm just personally interested.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a personal interest because it fascinates me, even though it's not about self-improvement.
Okay, I can't resist. What is this book, Cows, Pigs book? What is it about?
Oh, great. It's a book about, it's an old and early book about insights from anthropology and history. So they look at how people in history, events in history, and then they look and they say, oh, like one of the weird events we see is, for example, the Salem witch trials, where people were tried for witchcraft, and they say, oh, this was so close to our modern age. How could people still believe in witchcraft? And then they show that it's actually not mainly driven by this sort of irrational witchcraft thing, but driven by very logical society and power interactions. So in the witchcraft example, for example, it was driven by the need for the state to assert power over its citizens, and they did this by spreading terror through witchcraft. So and evidence is, for example, the people who were accused of witchcraft were people who were either had low power or were against the people running the city and so on. You'd never see like the religious leader being accused of witchcraft or the governor. So there are many examples, such as why do some religions ban eating cows? Why do some religions ban eating pigs? And that's because in the early establishment of the religion, maybe raising pigs would be too wasteful for the type of land that they had, and so on. So it explains a lot of things that we think are illogical or weird, but actually have a logical reasoning behind them. So that's another fun book that I like.
Excellent. So let me now open it up to questions. Folks, keep your questions short so we can get through as many, we can talk about as many things as possible. So it's going to be Joe, Dave, and Laura next. So Joe, go ahead.
Will we be able to ask a follow-up question maybe later?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll ask one now.
Yeah.
So the first question I have is, with the brain rewiring, do these assist people that may be dealing with past traumas, or is it specific to dealing with personality and self-improvement?
It can assist people dealing with past traumas. The tool is definitely powerful to do that. What I would caution is that if you're doing it by yourself, you should probably do it slowly, because if a trauma is basically something that's in your brain at a relatively low level. So if you're changing that, you probably don't want to do it the wrong way, because you could affect it in a way that's not optimal. So what I would recommend if you're going to use that is definitely understand the first books in the sequence well, and then read the instant self-hypnosis book, and then try the things in the instant self-hypnosis book first. Don't do the Eriksonian Approaches one. only after you've tried the self-hypnosis books and tried it for quite a while. I'd say maybe at least a month, and then if you think it's good, then move on to the Eriksonian. But for general trauma, in general, I advise using the self-hypnosis level.
Thank you.
Excellent. Next up is Dave, Laura, and then Sana. Dave, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's a very interesting discussion, and I really appreciate your concept of sequencing books. So if I like that, if I ask somebody for some books, to ask them for a sequence, that's a great insight. The other thing I would ask is if you could add maybe publication dates, because I suspect maybe these are recent books, although I think Seneca I saw in there is not too recent. But most of my psychology reading was 25 years ago, and I didn't recognize anything. But anyway, thanks again for great discussion.
Great. So publication dates. I think if you click on the link, it links directly, so you can get it. But I could also add the publication date so you get an idea of how recent the research is. To my knowledge, the only books where the research is wrong is books like Thinking Fast and Slow, which is basically all of it has failed to replicate. Willpower Instinct is still controversial. I mentioned the ones that don't have solid research in the description of the books.
Thank you. Next up is Laura. Laura, can you unmute yourself and ask the question? And Laura, please keep your question short so we can get through as many questions. Go ahead.
Okay, well, from a personal perspective, I have brain damage and I've had trauma. And in the last 12 years, everybody has told me, well, sorry, you have brain damage and there's not much we can do. And I've been trying very much to see if I could do things. And sometimes they say, well, we'll see, maybe there's a little bit, some therapy we can do here and there. And I would love to know if there was something I could do to rewire myself. But honestly, I don't have the capacity to do that with my brain. I can't make my sick brain, I can't personally tell my sick brain what to do. And so I was wondering if you knew of any kind of therapy that was when somebody has an actual trauma, if they can really do something for themselves,
Okay,
I mean,
so
my
let me go ahead and put a disclaimer. This is all educational stuff.
Yeah.
Anybody, if they have any kind of a serious issue, we definitely recommend talking to medical professionals. But Brian, with that disclaimer, please go ahead.
Sure. I agree. Talk to medical professionals. You could also talk to a licensed hypnotherapist who should be able to assess whether hypnotherapy can work for you. Hypnotherapy is not a silver bullet. It works for some people and it doesn't work for others. So I would suggest an initial consultation. I don't think doing this by yourself would be the best move at this point.
Thank you. Next up is Sana. Sana, go ahead.
Hi, Brian. I was wondering from your research and reading all those books, do you have maybe a short list of golden rules that you live by or you can advise on?
Golden rules. So something like the Jordan Peterson 12, was it 10?
12
rules.
12 rules.
I thought about this a while ago, but I forgot because it's really easy to forget since you're living them. But that's a good question. If I remember it, I will. If I can find it, actually, if I can find it, I'll post it. But I forgot because I think the marginal benefit of my rules is probably not that much compared to ones you can find elsewhere. But I'll try and look for
Brian, can you name one rule or one or two rules that you live by? I know that you're a very systematic thinker and you proceed very systematically. So any one rule.
Okay, I think one rule is, okay, sure, okay. One rule is that when I do something, I always choose something that I can do, even if it's very ambitious. And I think having the mindset that you're able to do anything is really important. So that's one of the things that I try to do.
Excellent. Thank you. So folks, you can ask questions by typing exclamation mark. I have infinite number of questions for Brian, but I'll give your questions priority. Okay. So how do you choose which books to read? I've heard of you talking about such a great variety of books. At the same time, you're always very specific about what you're reading at a given time. So how do you choose what books to read?
Oh, great question. This is extremely important. We all have a limited amount of books that we can read, even if we're Tyler Cowen. So what we need to do is that it's much easier to read better books than it is to increase your reading speed or reading comprehension. One way I found that is not useful is book reading lists on the internet from people that you don't understand. What I found useful is that I've seen two people's book reading lists that I really appreciate. One is Derek Sivers, and the other is Nat Ellison. And then I've only appreciated their books after I understood how they think. So that would be going through their website, emailing them to chat, and reading the newsletters and so on. So once you've done that, you have sufficient context to know whether someone's book recommendations are reliable and whether they will be suitable for you. So I think same as for my book recommendations. If you just look at the list, even though I provided more content than usual on why the book would be good, you still have to understand a bit of how I think before you know how it's good for you. And so how I choose books is that's one way, going through book recommendations of people I like. And secondly is by topics. So I mentioned to you before that a few years ago, I was researching about China for reasons that were related to my life decisions overall. So that's one way to look, think, oh, will there be any, will I need to make any major decisions in the coming few years? If I do, what type of information would be the most useful for making those decisions? And if once I've identified what information is useful, what's the most effective way of getting that information? It could be books, it could be blogs, it could be internet discussions, it could be in-person discussions, it could be asking people for advice, a lot of things. For some of them, books would be the most useful. And so for those, you would then go into that topic and look for the most recommended books.
Excellent. As promised, if anybody has questions, I'm going to defer to them. So Joe, you're next.
So one of the things that I do when I'm, maybe I'll read a couple of books simultaneously, and you've kind of put them in order. And the reason why I do that is I scan them for things that I actually really, that catch my eye. Is this list something that I will have to go through, that you recommend going through cover to cover before going to the next book instead of simultaneously reading them? Because, that's something where I often look to try and put, somebody taught me Syntopica, about putting different concepts together, but I just wanted to see if, if this is this reading list is more geared towards an ordered way of approach to learning.
I'm a big fan of the simultaneous approach, and I use it myself actually when learning about a new topic. So I get 5 or 6 books and then read, because you can see what are the differences in them. The areas where they all agree, you can basically instantly accept. But the ones where they disagree, you can think more about. So I think that's a great approach. Unfortunately, most people don't read books this way. They tend to read one by one. So that's why I structured my recommendations linearly. If I was going to structure them in this type of simultaneous way, I'd probably have them at maybe 2 to 3 levels for each one. So you read several books in the first level and then several books in the second level at a time. So I haven't done that. And this book is more geared towards a linear style. But if you're going through them one by one, I don't think it's important to completely finish a book. Especially for the books in the early parts of the sequence. You can read them. Once you think you've understood the main gist of the book, then just read the next one. Like you can come back if you want, but that's probably not the optimal use of your reading time. So feel free to go through and read the parts you like.
And given the amount of information software and reading, isn't there some sort of schema that you can put on paper where you, as you were reading, you would be sort of diagramming what information so that you could build a more concise kind of framework for yourself?
Laura, that's an excellent question. Go ahead, Brian.
This is great, and this is really popular lately in terms of note-taking technologies, mind maps, and all that. I'm personally I work differently. I know that it's effective and that diagramming your notes is extremely effective, especially for future retention. But I've never been able to do this myself. Same for spaced repetition, which is an extremely effective tool for learning new things. My brain just rejects it. It just doesn't like this type of note-taking thing. So I personally have not been doing that, but I'd recommend it for people who can. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. All right. So let me see. Now, what topics? See, the core of the interest of most of the people here is to try to understand human beings. Try to understand ourselves. Try to understand how we relate to society. Basically, core is about human beings. So, what has been your experience? You have a good memory, and you're able to recount kind of what you've been thinking about in the past pretty well. So what has been your journey about trying to figure out stuff about human beings, and what have been kind of the major milestones in that journey?
So I think when I actually got interested in learning about other people and myself, pretty late in my journey. Early on, I was mostly learning about When I used to work as a stock analyst, and that's very related to self-improvement, because stock analysis is about how we can dispassionately analyze something and make an estimate of the future. So those two things are very important skills for understanding other people and understanding ourselves. So that was what I was interested in first. So that's adjacent to things such as rationality, which is a structured way of understanding this type of thing. And it's also related to overcoming our emotional biases and our cognitive biases, which is also related to understanding other people. So after I worked on those areas for a few years, I noticed the missing part is that now I understand things, but I don't understand how other people understand things. And so that's the part about understanding how other people think and how they work. And looking into that, I noticed there were two levels, as we discussed last time. One is the level of the individual, and one is at the level of the group. So both of these were pretty important to understand. I started from the individual level because that's was easier for me to understand. So that's that's based on, those would lead to several of the sequences in the books, such as the power sequence. And then the group level would be stuff such as the human ethology book. So that part came later, once I understood how individual people tend to think and act. And so that's been my journey towards understanding things. Luckily, as I understood more, I noticed that my desires changed more and more into wanting the world in general to be better. Whereas at the start, mainly I was focused on how could I improve my situation, and then as time went on, I focused on improving our situation.
Excellent. Another angle I want to focus on is this relationship between science and humanities. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is that you are a very deliberate thinker, and you are kind of trying to measure things as best as you can about human things, whether it is psychology or sociology. So what do you think is the relationship between kind of the science methods and humanities?
Yeah, I think multidisciplinary is definitely the right approach. Science, I grew up with basically on the science path, all through school and through work, and the humanities stuff came later. I think this is the right approach. If you start with humanities and try to add science, it'll be much tougher, because a lot of the science stuff you need to learn is tough. So like if you learn statistics when you're 18, it's reasonably easy. If you learn calculus when you're 18, it's reasonably easy. But if you try to learn that when you're 30 or 40, it's much harder. I mean, even now, I'm trying to learn graph theory for fun, and it's much slower than it would be if I was younger. Whereas the humanities stuff is the reverse. If you try to learn humanities stuff when you're 18, you don't have enough experience and context to learn it well. So you're learning about, what were the causes of World War II? Well, like, you don't care about that when you're 18. It's not relevant to you. And it doesn't teach you that many skills that you can immediately apply. So I think learning humanities at a young age is not the best way. Once you're maybe in your 20s or 30s, that's a good time to learn humanities. It gets easier to learn because you can situate it in the right context. And it's more useful to you now, because now that you're older, you have more ability to affect things. And so humanity teaches you, now that science teaches you the tools of how to affect things, humanity teaches you why and what you should affect. And so I think my approach would be to use the science tools on humanities. I think that's the best multidisciplinary way to do this. And luckily, there are a lot of ways you can apply this. Science tools you can use in business, you can use for sociology, for a lot of these things. And people who started on the humanities track are very weak in these areas. So just by applying even basic statistical methods, for example, you can already add a lot of value there. So I think that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
So you mentioned you had tried some mind mapping. As far as what tools have you used that I know that you said that it hasn't necessarily worked for you, but what tools have you used and what software have you used in order to maybe extract concepts from books?
So I tried mind mapping on paper, and it was on paper, and I didn't like it. So I haven't tried any software tools. The tools I use to retain concepts and to have them is that I don't retain facts in general. So if you ask me concrete facts, I don't retain them. What I do is I try to attach new concepts to my existing concepts. So this is how I build up my concepts. So and as you can probably see, there's a big risk here. If you have one of your concepts which is wrong, and you attach new concepts onto it, then that's a disaster. So in practice, what I do is when I have a new concept, I have a group of friends who are very, very fact and detail focused. So I run it by them, ask them whether it's right or wrong, and I trust their analysis. And so that's how I do it. If it's right, then I add it onto my existing concepts.
Let me ask a follow-up on that. In terms of talking to people and getting feedback from people, whether it is online or through conversations, what role does it play in your thinking? What value has that given you, that kind of feedback?
Oh, well, a lot of value, a huge value. Talking to people, I think everyone that I talk to has an area where they excel in, which is something they do much better than I do. And so I'm lucky in that I'm able to quickly identify which areas someone is really good at. And then usually people love to talk about the area since they're good at it. So then I can talk about that and learn quickly from them. So it's been extremely useful. I think the internet has been a huge blessing. I've been able to find a lot of people in many different areas that know much more than me about stuff. And so they're able to bring me up to speed very quickly about things. I think in general, the internet is great for getting to top 1% to top 5% in many fields quickly. And then after you're at the top 1% and you want to go to the top 0.1%, that's where you need to spend extra time by yourself, maybe by reading more books, maybe by doing more deliberate practice.
That's wonderful. Now, Jairo has a question or comment. Jairo, you want to go ahead? Just keep it brief. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I find the sequence interesting. So I was wondering, because maybe I don't feel I'm ready for the rewiring of me, but so maybe I should take a look at the first one, power. Maybe I'm weak on power, and then followed by wisdom. So maybe what if I took the first one in power and take a look at it for a week, then go on to wisdom and take a look at the first one for a week, and so on, and then after 8 weeks go back to power and go to the second one, and so on like that. What do you think about that?
I'd suggest a T-shaped approach. So that would be reading the first book in each category and seeing which one interests you the most. After you've found which book you like the most, just continue down that path. The books are structured so that they should, if you're interested in the topic, they should be very easy to read. They shouldn't overload they shouldn't be overloading you if you're reading it at a moderate pace. So I'd suggest looking at the first book, seeing which one's the best, and then going down that path.
So if, Brian, it is 1 hour, if your kids are up and
yes, I have to go. Yes.
All right, wonderful.
Thank you a lot for having me here. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, Brian, it was delightful. It's wonderful, to share not just your book list, but your kind of general approach to things with so many people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
See you next time.
Okay, thanks.